at the edge of the Serengeti, where forest thins and grassland begins its endless stretch. A silence hung in the midday air, tense, expectant. This part of the savanna was a place where trees gave way to tall yellow grass, where elephants ambled in the distance and lions lounged under acacias. But today, there was someone, who didn't belong. A lone gorilla. He moved quietly through the underbrush, his large frame almost ghostly against the golden light. His fur, thick and soot-dusted, bore the signs of a recent trauma. His homeland, far to the west, had been consumed by fire. A dry season blaze had reduced his old forest to ash and smoke. And in the chaos, his troop had scattered. He had wandered for days, weeks maybe, always heading east, always searching for safety, for water, for anything familiar, but nothing was. He had never seen this open country before. There were no thick vines to swing from, no shady canopies to rest under, only grass that whispered against his sides as he passed, and the distant scent of predators. He knew how to stay out of sight. He was big, yes, but he was not violent unless provoked. He was cautious, curious, and now, he was utterly alone. His large hands brushed the earth gently as he walked on all fours, scanning the landscape with deep, thoughtful eyes. The wind carried the scent of dry earth and wildebeest, of heat and dust. But then, through the breeze, something else, sharp, sudden, a cry, not a territorial roar, not a warning call. It was pain. The gorilla froze. It came again, a desperate yelp, faint and strained, like breath through broken ribs. It was nearby, just beyond the brush where the tall grass thickened. He hesitated, standing on his hind legs, nostrils flaring. He should have turned away. It wasn't his business. The savanna was not his home. And whatever made that sound could be dangerous, or dying. But something in it reminded him of the smaller ones in his old troop. The way they had cried out during the fire. The way they had disappeared. He stepped forward, slowly, cautiously, pushing through the tall grass. He came to a small clearing ringed by thorny brush. At the center lay a small, shadowed figure, a black panther cub. Its sleek, obsidian fur was speckled with dirt and dried blood. One paw was bent unnaturally. Its flanks rose and fell with alarming irregularity. Wide golden eyes stared up at the gorilla, full of pain and panic. It tried to growl, but the sound came out as a cough, wet, weak. The gorilla blinked. He had seen leopards before. They were hunters, solitary and fierce. Even their cubs were born with razor-sharp instincts. And yet this one, it was broken. Its body trembled in the grass. Too exhausted to flee, he looked around. No mother in sight, no scent of pride or pack. Just silence, abandonment. The gorilla shifted from foot to foot. His kind didn't intervene in such things. In his old world, you watched from a distance. You respected the flow of nature. But those eyes, they were not the eyes of a predator. Not now. They were the eyes of something that didn't want to die alone. The gorilla lowered himself slowly, lowering one great hand to the earth. He let out a soft, barely audible grunt, not threatening, not dominant. The cub didn't move, but its breathing quickened. He reached forward. The cub flinched. He paused, palm open, waiting. Then, something remarkable happened. The panther cub, shaking, lifted its head slightly and nudged its nose into the gorilla's hand. Just once. Then it collapsed again. That was enough. Carefully, impossibly gentle for a creature his size. The gorilla slipped his massive hands under the cub's body. The fur was warm, feverish, and matted with blood. He could feel the fractured bone beneath the skin, the shallow rhythm of struggling lungs. He gathered the cub into his arms and stood. The tall grass swallowed him as he turned away from the clearing, moving back toward the tree line. He didn't know where he was going. He had no troop, no guide, no reason, except this: the cub. He walked through the heat of the savannah, ignoring the circling vultures above, the distant shapes of hyenas too cowardly to challenge something so large. The gorilla's dark silhouette cut through the grass like a silent guardian. His pace even, his burden cradled close. For the first time since the fire, he wasn't just surviving, he was protecting. By nightfall, they had reached a cluster of boulders shaded by a pair of low trees, a place where the wind was gentler, where the rocks gave warmth from the fading sun. There, the gorilla made a nest of dry grass and soft leaves. Laying the cub down gently, the panther whimpered once, curling into itself, tail twitching. The gorilla sat beside it and began softly brushing the dirt and blood from its fur with his fingers, one stroke at a time. And when the stars came out, clear and endless in the Serengeti sky, he watched over it like a sentinel, refusing sleep. The wild had taken everything from him. But tonight, it had given him something back. A chance, a purpose. And somewhere in the quiet grassland, where trees whispered secrets to the stars, a bond was formed, fragile, improbable, and real. A stranger had come to the plains, and stayed, not because he belonged, but because he chose to care. The Serengeti sun had begun to soften, dipping just low enough to stretch long shadows across the vast plains. But the peace of evening was shattered by the low, guttural whoops rising from behind the ridge. Hyenas. At first, it was only one, a sharp-eyed scout that had picked up the scent of blood on the breeze and crept downwind from the edge of a dry riverbed. But within moments, the rest of the pack appeared, 6, 7, maybe more, muzzles stained with old hunts, eyes glowing yellow with hunger and cruelty. They were drawn not by curiosity, but by instinct. Something weak was nearby, something dying. They didn't care what species it was. To them, the world was simple: predator and prey, flesh and bone, opportunity and hunger. And now they had found one. Through the tall grass, they saw the broad, dark figure of the gorilla walking upright. And in his arms, the real prize, a small, injured black panther cub. Its blood-slick fur glinted in the fading sunlight. A feast, weak, easy. The lead hyena let out a high-pitched cackle and lunged forward. The chase began. The gorilla turned sharply, sensing danger with a chill that ran down his spine. The cries of the hyenas reached his ears a heartbeat later. He didn't hesitate. Clutching the panther cub close against his chest, he broke into a run. Despite his size, the gorilla moved fast, faster than one might expect from such a massive creature. His long, powerful arms helped propel him across the uneven terrain, his knuckles slamming the earth with each bound. He dodged thickets, hurdled low shrubs, pushed past the reeds with a strength that snapped them like twigs. But the hyenas were faster, lower to the ground and born for pursuit. They streaked after him like a wave of snarling, dusty shadows. Their yips and growls filled the air, building into a terrifying chorus that echoed across the plains. Dust erupted beneath their paws. The grass bent and whipped in their wake. The gorilla grunted with effort, not daring to look back. Every movement, every breath, was focused on forward momentum. He could feel the cub's tiny body pressed against him, its heart racing, its limbs limp. He shifted his grip slightly, cradling it tighter with one hand while the other helped him surge forward. But the distance was closing. One hyena veered left, attempting to flank. Another came in fast from the right. Their mouths hung open, teeth glistening, tongues lolling with savage anticipation. The gorilla's mind raced. He had no pack, no backup, no trees tall enough nearby to climb to safety. He was a stranger here, unfamiliar with escape routes, unaware of where solid ground became mud, or where the grass hid dangerous holes. And yet, he did not stop. A root caught his foot. He stumbled, nearly falling, but regained balance in one brutal movement, spinning and slamming his shoulder into a low shrub to keep momentum. The cub whimpered in his grasp, its head tucked beneath his arm. A snarl exploded just behind him. A hyena leapt. Instinct took over. The gorilla spun mid-run and struck with his free arm, fist closed. Muscles coiled like steel. The blow landed squarely against the hyena's shoulder, sending it skidding sideways with a yelp of pain. It rolled, got back up, and snarled again, but hesitated now. The others didn't. The pack surged forward. The gorilla made a sharp decision. A nearby ridge, steep, rocky, and dotted with boulders, rose not far ahead. It would slow them all, but him less so. He veered left, his feet pounding into the hardening dirt as he angled for higher ground. The climb began. Rocks tore at his feet, but he gripped him tightly. Every step upward forced his body to work harder, muscles screaming from the strain. Behind him, the hyenas scrambled in chaotic pursuit, less graceful on the incline, more desperate now. Dust clouded the air. He reached a narrow ledge, just wide enough for his feet, and paused. He turned. The pack was seconds behind. The lead hyena lunged again, closer this time. With a roar that thundered from his chest, the gorilla smashed a loose stone down the hill. It struck the lead hyena in the chest, knocking it back and scattering the ones behind it in a dusty flurry. They tumbled down, snarling, yelping, regrouping. It bought only seconds. But seconds were enough. The gorilla turned and leapt. Beyond the ridge, the land sloped downward into a small ravine shaded by thorn trees. The fall jarred his knees. But he didn't stop, he ran again, weaving through low bushes and rocky outcrops. The terrain was narrowing, natural barriers rising on either side. Good. He needed fewer angles to defend. He spotted a hollow under a collapsed tree trunk. Half hidden in shadow. Without a pause, he dropped to his knees and slid the cub inside. It whimpered again but remained still. The gorilla placed one massive hand over the entrance, shielding it. Then he turned. The hyenas arrived moments later. They fanned out across the slope. Eyes wild, teeth bared. The lead hyena limped slightly from the earlier blow. But its face burned with rage. It barked once, signaling a final charge. The gorilla rose to his full height. He beat his chest, once, twice, then roared. Not a sound of fear or pain, but of fury, of defiance. It echoed through the gorge like thunder, shaking leaves from branches and making even the wind pause. The hyenas hesitated. It was not a sound they were used to hearing from prey. The gorilla picked up another rock and slammed it against the boulder beside him. The pack wavered. The lead hyena took one step forward. The gorilla stepped toward it. Another rock smashed into the ground. The hyena flinched. Then, one by one, the pack began to retreat, growling, snapping at each other, casting wary glances at the massive, panting figure that had refused to fall. Finally, silence. The gorilla stood motionless, heart thundering in his chest. His arms shook. His legs threatened to give way. But they didn't. Only when the last of the hyenas disappeared into the tall grass did he lower his body and turn back to the hollow beneath the tree. The cub was still there, watching, still alive, still breathing. The gorilla reached in with a trembling hand and gently pulled the panther cub into his arms again. He held it close, felt its breath against his chest, and let out a long, ragged sigh. They were safe. For now. The plains around them were quiet again. The sun now a deep orange on the horizon. In that moment, beneath a tree in a land not his own, a lone gorilla, burned from loss, burdened by instinct, exhausted by danger, sat with a broken panther cub in his arms. He had chosen not to run alone, and in return, he had found something worth protecting, something that even the wild could not take without a fight. The light of day was fading into the orange embers of evening. The golden grass of the Serengeti swayed in long waves, carrying whispers of a brewing storm. But it wasn't thunder that stirred the horizon, it was tension, fear, and the unwavering resolve of a stranger who had nothing left to lose. The gorilla had been running for what felt like hours, his muscles burning, lungs straining, heart pounding with every step. He had crossed the plains, climbed rocks, descended into valleys, all while holding the wounded panther cub tight against his chest. But now, there was nowhere left to run. He stopped beside the base of a massive baobab tree, its roots gnarled and thick, spreading across the earth like the arms of a giant elder. There was a hollow between its roots, just large enough to shelter the cub. Gently, the gorilla knelt, his breath ragged and his body trembling. He laid the cub inside the hollow. brushing a hand across its head as the small creature whimpered faintly. Its breath was shallow but still steady. Its golden eyes opened, barely, locking onto the gorilla's face for a fleeting moment. That was all he needed. The gorilla rose. He turned, placing his massive frame directly between the tree and the approaching threat. The hyenas had caught up. 8 of them, now, snarling, frothing, eyes gleaming with madness and hunger. They spread out in a semicircle, surrounding him. Dust clung to their coats. Their growls trembled the grass. The one that had taken the worst of his earlier blows stepped forward again. Its lips curled in a vicious grin. They knew he was tired, alone, bleeding, but they had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed he would surrender. The gorilla stood tall, his arms spread wide, teeth bared in a low, guttural growl that rumbled from deep within his chest. His fur bristled, his eyes, dark, bloodshot, and unwavering, burned with something more terrifying than rage. Purpose. The first hyena lunged. With a thunderous roar, the gorilla met it mid-air, swinging his forearm in a sweeping arc. The hyena collided with his arm and was sent tumbling sideways, yelping in pain. But the others came fast. Another leapt onto his back, sinking its teeth into his shoulder. He roared again, grabbed it by the scruff, and hurled it against a nearby rock. A third snapped at his legs. He stomped the ground with enough force to crack the dirt, sending it staggering back. But even the strongest warrior can only fight so long. One hyena found its opening. It lunged straight at his chest, but at the last second, the gorilla twisted, using his left arm to shield the cub's hiding place. The hyena's teeth tore into his arm. A spray of blood streaked the air. The gorilla grunted in pain but didn't fall. His hand clamped down on the hyena's jaw, and with a mighty shove, he flung it away. His arm shook, bleeding freely now, deep, red, and raw. Still, he did not move from his spot. The cub behind the tree whimpered softly, as if sensing the pain of its protector. The gorilla glanced back once, only once, long enough to know it was still breathing. That was enough. Another hyena tried to flank him from the side. He turned with lightning speed, barreled forward, and knocked it off its feet. He used the moment to reposition, his back once more to the tree. His chest rose and fell in shallow, labored gasps. Blood dripped from multiple gashes. A cut above his brow blinded his left eye. He was cornered, surrounded, but still, he stood. And then, at the very moment when the hyenas prepared for their final charge, they heard it. A roar, far in the distance, but unmistakable. The hyenas paused. Another roar, closer this time. Low, deep, and furious. The gorilla's eyes narrowed. He turned his head slightly, ears twitching. The grass beyond the ridge rippled. Something was coming. Then it appeared. A black blur. Fast, silent, deadly. The mother panther. She moved like a shadow come alive, every muscle flexing in calculated fury. Her emerald eyes locked instantly onto the gorilla, then the cub, then the hyenas. She didn't roar again. She didn't need to. In seconds, she was upon them. The nearest hyena turned to run. But not fast enough. The panther launched into the air. Claws extended. And struck. A scream echoed. She swiped once, tearing through fur and flesh. Then turned on the next. The pack scattered. 2 hyenas tried to fight. One was thrown into the dirt with a swipe so fast it was over before it began. The other was bitten hard across the back and sent yelping into the grass. In less than a minute, the whole pack fled, wounded, humiliated, and beaten. The gorilla collapsed to his knees. His breath came in great, shuddering gasps. Blood dripped from his arms, his chest, his leg, his muscles twitched with exhaustion. But he was alive. And so was the cub. The panther turned toward the tree, sniffing once, then twice. She approached cautiously, crouching low as she reached the hollow. A soft cry greeted her. She lowered her head and nudged the cub gently with her nose. The cub stirred, then let out a faint, raspy purr. Mother and child, reunited. The panther turned then, eyes fixed on the gorilla. They stared at each other in silence. Predator and outsider, yet no hostility remained, only something unspoken. An understanding. The gorilla, breathing heavily, did not move. He bowed his head slightly. The panther, still poised and watchful, gave the smallest of nods, then turned and curled herself around the cub protectively. The gorilla leaned against the tree and closed his eyes, finally allowing the pain to settle in. From the grass, the breeze whispered again, this time gentle, almost warm. The sun had dipped behind the hills. Twilight had arrived, and in the dimming light, something impossible had happened. Not a battle for territory, not a struggle between predator and prey, but a fight for life, for connection, for something worth protecting, even at the cost of one's own blood. Hours later, long after the stars came out and the hyenas were gone, the panther and her cub remained nestled beneath the tree, and a short distance away, the gorilla slept, his massive frame slumped but peaceful, the faint rise and fall of his chest steady. He had given everything for a life that was not his own. And in doing so, he had found a place, not just in the wild, but in something deeper, a bond forged not by species, but by courage, by love. Dawn crept slowly over the Serengeti, brushing the sky with soft hues of lavender and rose. The golden grass glistened with dew, still untouched by the heat of the coming day. The world was quiet again, hushed and reverent, as if acknowledging the delicate miracle that had unfolded beneath the ancient baobab tree. The black panther cub lay curled against its mother, safe, breathing steadily. The mother, sleek, strong, and silent, kept one paw gently across her child's back, her body a shield, her eyes watchful. The night's chaos had faded into memory, but her instincts remained sharp. A few meters away, the gorilla stirred. He had not truly slept, only drifted in and out of pained awareness. His body still aching from the wounds of battle. Scratches lined his arms. One gash above his eye had closed with a crust of dried blood. His left shoulder throbbed where the hyena's teeth had torn deep. But none of that mattered. He moved slowly now, cautiously, as not to startle the panther. Rising to his feet, he cast one final glance toward the tree's base, where the cub slept. A moment passed. Then, something unexpected happened. The cub opened its eyes. It blinked once, recognizing the gorilla through blurred vision. And then, with surprising strength, it stood, wobbly but determined, and padded slowly across the earth toward him. The panther mother tensed, her muscles taut with alertness. She rose silently, her eyes fixed on the gorilla, ready to strike if he made one wrong move. But the cub moved faster. It reached the gorilla and nuzzled against his leg gently. The gorilla looked down, surprised. The cub gazed up, and for a moment, just a moment, it pressed its small head softly against the gorilla's chest, right where his heart beat. The gesture was simple, silent, and full of meaning. Behind them, the panther mother stepped forward. The gorilla went still. They locked eyes, predator and stranger. Her emerald gaze was piercing, unreadable. She was tense, proud, and utterly in control. And yet, there was no growl, no warning. She looked down at her cub. She looked up at the gorilla. And then, she nodded. It was a slow, subtle movement, almost imperceptible, but clear. A gesture not of submission, nor friendship, but acknowledgement, a quiet thank you from one guardian to another. The gorilla lowered his head slightly in return. Then he turned away. He walked slowly at first, limping from his injuries, every step sending dull fire through his limbs. He did not look back. He did not pause. He simply moved forward, one large footfall at a time. Away from the baobab tree. Away from the cub. Away from the moment that had changed him. Toward the forest. It rose in the distance like a dark silhouette against the morning sky. A place of shadows and green silence. A place where he had once belonged, and maybe could again. The trees were still far, but they called to him now. Not as home, not yet, but as the next place he needed to be. From the hill behind, the panther and her cub climbed slowly to a higher perch. They stood there, side by side, watching. The cub's head rested against its mother's leg. She stared into the distance, eyes fixed on the figure moving farther and farther across the plains. The gorilla's silhouette was strong, proud, even in injury. And though he did not glance back, it was as if he knew they were there. There was no hatred in their eyes now, no mistrust, only gratitude, and something quieter still, respect. A breeze swept through the grass, whispering across the hill. The sun edged over the horizon, casting long, warm beams of light across the savanna. The baobab stood tall, still and sacred, the silent witness to all that had passed. Below, the gorilla walked on. He carried nothing, not a single thing, only memories. Of a cry in the grass. Of a cub in his arms. Of a mother's eyes. Of a fight worth enduring. He had arrived in the Serengeti as an outsider, lost, displaced, burdened by the ruin of fire and the loneliness of being without kin. But he left not empty, because somewhere, in the wildness and the wounds, he had found something rare, a bond born not of blood or species, but of shared survival, a fleeting, fragile moment of trust between two beings who should have feared each other. And that was enough. Behind him, the panther lowered her head and gave her cub a gentle nudge. It turned once more to look at the shrinking shape on the horizon. Then, slowly, they both turned back toward the trees. Back into the wild, back into their lives. And the grass closed behind them. As if nothing had happened. But something had. A story had been written, in footprints. In blood. In glances held just long enough to mean something. And though it would never be spoken in words, never recorded in the ways humans understood, it would remain in the earth, in the scent of the wind, in the gaze of two predators who had once been strangers, and in the quiet, wounded heart of a gorilla walking home. The wild, as ever, was cruel and untamed, but on that hill, for one morning, love had been enough to save a life. And that made all the difference. Under a blanket of stars, the Serengeti slept. The grass swayed in the moonlight, whispering soft secrets to the wind. Insects hummed low songs in the dark, and the distant roar of a lion echoed across the savanna like a slow drumbeat. The wilderness was quiet, but never truly still. Life moved through the darkness, always watching, always waiting, and somewhere out there, not far from the edge of a long, cracked trail, a gorilla sat alone. He had found shelter beneath a twisted acacia, its roots spreading like fingers into the earth. His breathing had steadied, though his body still ached. Blood matted the fur of his arm where the hyena had struck. A jagged wound across his shoulder throbbed with every movement. But he was alive. And more than that, he was awake. Not just in body, but in spirit. He stared out across the vast emptiness, his dark eyes reflecting the moonlight. He had never meant to be a part of this land. He had arrived as an accident, driven by fire, hunger, and displacement. Yet somehow, in the middle of a world that was not his, he had become part of something greater. A story, a mystery, a miracle. The gorilla who saved a predator's child. No one would have believed it if they hadn't seen it. And yet, by the following week, the tale had already begun to ripple across the ranger outposts, passed between voices in the dark, around fires, in radio chatter and whispered awe. A solitary gorilla, wounded and wandering, had chosen compassion, not for one of his own kind, not for something familiar, but for a creature his instincts should have feared or ignored. A predator, a panther, and not just that, a cub. Did he raise it? Some asked. No, just saved it. Others replied. Fought off a pack of hyenas. With what? His fists. With everything, the oldest ranger answered. Everything he had. Even now, rangers who had never seen the gorilla kept their eyes open on patrol, half hoping for a glimpse of the silent protector. They looked for massive footprints in the soft clay near watering holes, for broken branches too high for antelope to reach. A few swore they had seen him, limping along the riverbank, pausing at dusk on the ridgeline, never staying in one place too long. But no one got close. The gorilla, it seemed, had returned to the wilds. Not as a ghost, but as a quiet guardian. A creature changed. At one station, pinned above the logbooks, a young ranger had written the now famous words on a piece of brown paper. Life does not recognize species. And love does not require words. Below it, someone else had scrawled in smaller writing. In the wild, reason doesn't always survive, but sometimes, kindness does. It was this paradox that haunted those who heard the story. The Serengeti was not a place of mercy. It was a place of survival. Claws, fangs, hunger, speed. These were the laws that ruled. And yet, one act of empathy, one impossible, irrational decision, had shifted something. Even if just for a moment. The gorilla had not fought for family. Not for territory. Not even for survival. He had fought for a life that was not his. And that choice, unreasonable, unnatural, was exactly what made it so deeply human. So deeply true. No one knew where he had gone. The fires that had destroyed his forest were long dead now. His troop, if still alive, were scattered, perhaps far beyond recovery, but those who spoke of him now did so not as a displaced creature, but as a legend. Not a myth, but a message, that nature, for all its cruelty, still had space for wonder, that even in a world where death hunted with eyes and claws, something softer could still take root. Not weakness, not naivety, compassion. Some rangers debated what it meant. Was it a rare accident of intelligence? Was it guilt from losing his own? Was it some flickering trace of instinct misfired? But others didn't ask. They simply believed. They believed in what they saw. A wounded gorilla placing his own body between a defenseless cub and a circle of killers. They believed in the mother panther's gaze, not of vengeance, but of acknowledgement. They believed that something holy had unfolded that night, under the baobab tree, far from logic, but close to grace. And the gorilla? He carried none of this in thought. He did not reflect on heroism. He did not understand legend. He only knew the feel of a heartbeat against his chest, the weight of small claws resting in trust, and the sound of a mother's roar not as an end, but as a beginning. And so he walked, not to be found, not to be remembered, but because something inside him, some wild and wordless fire, had been awakened. He walked through valleys where antelope scattered before him. He drank from rivers under the moon, letting the water wash over the blood on his hands. He sat in trees and watched elephants cross in the morning mist. And some nights, far from where it all began, he would look up at the stars and pause, as if remembering. Not with regret, but with something like wonder. Out there, a panther cub grew stronger every day. It played under its mother's watchful eye. It pounced at grasshoppers and climbed rocks too tall for its legs. And though it never spoke, and never could, perhaps it, too, remembered the shape of those strong arms, the safety in that stillness, the silence that saved it. They were no longer in each other's lives, but they had changed each other forever. And that was enough. The Serengeti, vast and untamed, had many stories, of hunts, of survival, of extinction and endurance. But among them now, whispered through the grass and told in low voices around fires. Was this one of a gorilla who did not run from difference? Of a predator who did not punish help? Of a moment when nature broke its own rules, not in cruelty, but in compassion? Because sometimes, the most beautiful truths in the world are the ones that make no sense at all. And when everything else is sleeping, deep in the wild, kindness stays awake.
Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please comment 1. And if you didn't, just hit like. See you in the next videos.